Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. I have been thinking about three on a theme, institutional horror. So let's talk about it. So I'm sure that this is already a subgenre and that I'm not making anything up. But what I'm talking about is institutional horror, in that what's happening, or the horror part of the horrific things that are happening, are about people being locked up. So the three books that I'm thinking about are ones that I've read this year. One is The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. Tananarive Due? I don't know how many syllables I'm supposed to have. I have it around here somewhere. I don't know where it is. I can't find it, but I'll put the cover right here, but you know the one I'm talking about. And then my most recent read is The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. And I also read not too long ago The Devil in Silver, maybe it was last year, by Victor LaValle. So sometimes I think about horror and how people will say things like, that wasn't even scary, or I don't know why they were scared. It wasn't really scary to me. And I think it's like any other kind of thing, right? Like the things that are scary to one person aren't scary to another person. Some people really like jump scares, and some people really like more of that psychological kind of horror, or the creepy thing. You know, think about Hereditary. I think one of the scariest moments in Hereditary is when they're zooming out from the main character and they zoom back and that figure is on the ceiling. Not just because the figure is there, which is scary and spooky enough, but also the idea that he's been sleeping there and that figure has been there the whole time, like watching him. Like that's super creepy. And for me, that's one thing that I find creepy and terrible, right? Like when I'm at work, I work in a big building, and when I'm about to leave, I think one thing that would be so scary to me would be I'm walking out and locking the door of the entire building behind me, and I look in and there's somebody like still standing in there. Like they can't even get to me right now because I'm on the other side. But the fact that maybe they were in there and I didn't know they were in there, that is terrifying. And that's not terrifying for some people. I mean, weirdos. But it's scary to me, and so it's scary to me in books. Similarly, I've read a number of books lately that part of the scary element, the scary trope, is motherhood. So whether that's about being a mom, or being a mom and losing a baby, or being asked to raise other people's kids, you know, all of those kinds of things. So I recently read Nestling, and I recently, by Nat Cassidy, and then I recently read Just Like Mother, which again is around here somewhere, but where? I don't know. Maybe I'll do a review for that one since it's recent enough. And I also read Mother Things in audio, so maybe I'll do a 3 on a theme for that. Anyway, institutions. One thing that I find not just scary, but also a little bit, I don't know, mind numbing, is this idea that people can be locked away. Like that there's there are systems that allow for someone to lose so much of their bodily autonomy that they're locked behind a door for different reasons. So, and the zoomed out level, like that in it of itself is really like bonkers to me. But then zooming in on times that people are being locked away either against their will, or because of a misunderstanding, or they're being locked away and no one is ever gonna think about them again. Like those kinds of things are really scary to me. Not just gory scary or like clown scary, but scary as a concept in the world. Okay, so that's what we're talking about today. Book recs around that kind of scary. One is The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. You might have seen this one around, especially if you're on the shorter form platforms. Like I've seen a lot about this one on Instagram, more so than I've seen it on here or on TikTok. But this story is about a number of things. It's about this neighborhood in Pennsylvania called Chicken Hill, and it's a neighborhood of immigrants, primarily immigrant Jews, and right alongside some poor Black Americans. So it's a neighborhood of mingling, poverty, and all of those kinds of things. And there's this Jewish couple who, Chona is the woman, and she grew up in America of Jewish immigrants, and she's married to, I believe, someone who's maybe Hungarian or something like that. Bulgarian, something, something like that. Bulgarian, not Bulgarian. That's a donut. Anyways, they run a grocery store that caters to the Black Americans who live in their neighborhood. The husband is already pretty successful running a theater. So she really runs the grocery store, and she's very outspoken, and she doesn't always charge everyone. Like it's sort of like her way of supporting the neighborhood and giving back. So at some point, we hear how they come to be where they are. James McBride, I think, is a master storyteller in terms of character development and all of that sort of stuff. And there are a lot of characters to develop in this book. And at some point, one of the Black couples that this Jewish couple knows really well, and actually the Black male of the couple works for the theater that the Jewish man owns. The Black couple comes to them and says, we need help because my nephew, who is deaf, is on the list. You know, the state's trying to come and pick him up and put him in a home for feeble-minded people because he's deaf, but he's actually really smart. So the Jewish couple agreed to basically hide this boy who's somewhere between 10 and 12, who's deaf. Ultimately, he is found. A horrendous situation happens. He's found. He's taken to this institution. And the rest of the book, which is probably the second, not half of the book, but at least probably the last third, is sort of like, oh my God, how are we going to get Dodo out of the hospital? What do we need to do, right? And who's going to be involved in it, and what's the scheme, and how does it overlap with sort of the politics of the neighborhood and the richer part of the town, because Chicken Hill is just the poor side of the town, but it's a larger town. And the things that are going on in this institution, because it's the institution for the feeble-minded, right? So there are people in the institution who, there's lots of lots of like, just take your meds kind of stuff. And then there's someone that he meets who is, I can't remember, maybe multiple sclerosis or something like that, or a palsy, some sort of physical ailment that the book tells us, like, if this was 2020 something, then it would probably be diagnosed with X, Y, and Z. So we have our little boy character, our 10 to 12-year-old. So we get some of his POV once he's in the institution. There's a scary element about that. There's a scary character in there, but the scary part, and for me, was also the helplessness, lack of autonomy, I'm locked in this place kind of thing. And then we have all of the stuff that's happening with the neighborhood and the families and the Heaven and Earth grocery store, and sort of how Chona has carved out this place within a community where people want to help. And we also have this, the man and the Black couple has this reputation. So we're learning a little bit about all of that, although that is not as big of a deal as it seems like it's going to be, really. So I don't think that was too spoilery. I really love James McBride's writing. It's worth, reading him is worth that anyways. It does start out a little bit slow as we're getting to know the characters. And a book like this, because I tend to read things that are a little bit faster paced in general, sci-fi, YA romance. I found that a couple chapters in and I was like, am I bored or am I out of practice with reading a contemporary, and it's actually historical fiction, but reading something that is less like blowing things up, you know what I mean? And so I'm glad I stuck with this. I trust Jimmy McBee to take me to on a ride and to give me a story that will be worth it if I stick with it. So I would recommend on this one. The second one is Victor LaValle's The Devil in Silver. Again, love me some Victor LaValle. I've read a number of books by him. And this book is about a black man. Oh, actually, I think the main character is actually a white dude who is taken to a state hospital for safety watch on a Friday because he got into a fight with undercover police officers at the beginning of the book. And rather than arresting him and doing that paperwork, they take him to the state hospital. That by itself is fucking terrifying, okay, to me. So he gets basically put on a 72-hour hold towards the beginning of the book, and then they start feeding him the medication they give to everybody else that's in there in order to keep him docile, and he starts losing time. As he's in there and he starts to figure out like what's going on, his body acclimates to the meds, he starts to meet people. It turns out that there's this scary, no one really knows what's happening, but there's something going on in the building. Is it haunted? Is there a being? Is it an orderly? Like some shit's happening and nobody knows what it is, and they're all medicated, and sometimes people go missing or die and nobody really knows what's going on. And do the police know or do they not know? And what do the orderlies and the nurses know? This book even though there are parts of it where I truly believe people would be like, that's not scary. That book's not scary. You know, if you stop and think about what's happening to the people in the book, it's scary. There's the way that it resolves, or the things that happen throughout the book are also like, you don't really know what to expect and what's going on here. And so I really just enjoyed the ride of this book, and would recommend if you're into that. And then finally, The Reformatory. So Tananarive Due is a master horror storyteller, right? Nobody can contest that fact of life. And she tells a lot of different kinds of stories, but The Reformatory is about a boy who is sent to one of the schools in the South. I can't even remember where they are. Maybe Georgia, Alabama, Florida, something like that. It might not be Florida, because the Florida school specifically is in Nickel Boys, which is about a similar kind of school. So, and it might actually be about the same school. So historically speaking, in the U.S., there have been these schools, you can think about residential schools for Native Americans in the U.S., and then reform kinds of schools, particularly for poor white kids and for black marginalized kids, where these kids are deemed as, prisoners and sent to a reform school, or basically a work camp, right? And then they're never seen from, never heard again. And even up until I want to say maybe 1999, 2000, there was this school in Florida where they started finding the unmarked graves of boys that had been mistreated, like they could see the damage on the remains of these boys from this school that had happened. So I believe Nickel Boys is definitely about a specific school, and The Reformatory may or may not be about that specific school. It may just be inspired by that time in history. So anyway, our main character and his sister are living basically alone because their dad is a black activist who's been run out of town. I want to say this must be the 50s or 70s. I can't remember which. In my mind, those are the exact same time, and they're not really exactly the same time, but you know what I mean. They're the 50s or the 70s, I think. So the boy and his sister are walking, and the rich white guy sees the sister, starts being inappropriate. The boy brother kicks him, and the white dude's gonna let it go, but the white dude's dad sees him, and oh no, that black kid didn't just kick my son, right? Black kid gets sent to the reformatory. Turns out it is haunted, and we know that right off. I'm pretty sure it's in the description, so I'm not spoiling anything for you. But the black kid has increased. He has a sensitivity. It's like The Shining, right? He's got the shining for the spirits that are not at rest in the reformatory, and he's basically put to work to learn more about them or to find them to the benefit of the warden of the reformatory. So we've got what's going on there mostly from his point of view. And then we've got what's going on the outside with his sister and his dad and all them who are like, holy shit, what are we going to do because our kid's in the reformatory? And that book, at some point on TikTok, when I was reading that book, I posted a video that's like, oh my God, you guys, something bad's about to happen. You know what I mean? While I was reading that book. So that one was an emotional roller coaster. An emotional roller coaster for me. And also would recommend. So what do you guys think about institutional horror? Scary, not scary? Have you read any? Got any recommendations? Let me know down in the comments. And also like and subscribe if you want to talk more about books. Or I guess hear me talk more about books. Okay? Catch you on the next one.